My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm gonna let you say
Let's go, hey.
Got me started, wrist frames carded, pull up double parking, don't even pay like I'm the owner, my young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's Caleb, Becky, I'm with Julian. Welcome to the madness. We're here for week 2. How we feeling, Julian, after week 1?
You know what? I'm happy, man. We had good games this week. Like, we were sitting there over the weekend watching a lot of mid-major basketball, which there's nothing wrong with. But it's good to see some like massive, massive games go down this past week. And there were a decent amount of them, man.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, just recapping, 3 of the 5 that we had picked. Unfortunately, Purdue Gonzaga isn't underway. We're recording on Sunday, isn't underway until later. And UCLA Marquette isn't underway until later as well. Duke obviously knocking off Michigan State was a big win for Duke, kind of getting back on track after their loss to Arizona. Marquette knocking off Illinois, which we were both able to predict correctly. And Kansas knocked off Kentucky, which, I mean, wasn't a huge surprise. I thought Kentucky maybe was a chance, but we'll talk more about Kentucky later because they've really shown out and proven that when their 3 7-footers get back, they're going to be a team to beat.
yeah, man, those games are interesting. I mean, the Duke one, it really like it kind of was as we talked about. I mean, the bench did something. I mean, we'll talk about Caleb Foster later, but that was the big X factor for him. Because Filipowski and Proctor did their things, but it was the guys off the bench that finally had an impact for Duke. And Kentucky, like, if I still believe, and I'm gonna believe it until the end of the season until I'm proven wrong in some sense, which I don't think I will. If any one of those 3 7-footers play in that game on Tuesday night, I think Kentucky wins that game.
Yeah.
They were better than Kansas was. They just couldn't stop Hunter Dickinson, which, I mean, we talked about it last week that like once we kind of realized like, oh shoot, Kentucky doesn't have any big men. Like we knew that was going to be a problem, but like Thiero kind of did his thing.
I mean, if you add another rebounder on the floor for them, just a rebounder,
yep,
like a post presence on defense, it's a much better game. And I think, the efforts that Thiero had look a lot better. Obviously the backcourt and the bench did their thing and are starting to come into their own. The roles are starting to be straightened out. It looks like Edwards and Wagner are pretty underwhelming to start the year, but I think as they get going throughout the season, they're just 2 guys that primarily dominated off of isolation, throughout their development. I think Dillingham, although he was a player that, we'll talk about him later. I think although he was a player that, isn't, out of that lane of scoring, mostly isolation in high school and AAU, I think that his style of scoring is much more conducive to not needing space. You know what I mean?
He's translated better. And I do want to say, I do think Edwards has translated better than Wagner. I mean, Edwards, to his credit, has at least had an impact on the glass, on the defensive end. We talked about too many cooks in the kitchen. I think Wagner's going to be the guy that as the season goes on, Cal's going to be like, I can't justify.
I thought it was going to be Dillingham.
I did too. I think a lot of people did.
I mean, we said it in the pod with Raphael. I mean, we asked him, and he said he thought it was going to be Rob Dillingham, and I thought it was going to be Rob Dillingham. So I'm just surprised to see.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to. Can we lead talking about Dillingham while we're on the subject? If we're like before,
I want to get into our top 32, and then we can kind of cruise into the rest of the stuff. Week 2 still a lot to be proven, but to start, we got UConn 1, haven't moved. Just if it's going to be our philosophy throughout the year, if a team's not losing, unless there's a team below them that has a huge win, like we'll get to, with Baylor at 5, moving down from 3, there's just guys below them that had bigger wins, like Kansas, like Houston. We're just not going to move them down. So just to kind of put that in your guys' mind, going into the season. UConn 1, Arizona 2, Kansas 3 after the win against Kentucky, Houston 4 after their win against Utah, which we were both just really impressed by their defense. And Utah is still a really good team. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on the Utes throughout the year, and are going to get proven wrong throughout tournament time. We got Baylor 5, Duke 6 after the bounce back win against Michigan State. Kentucky still 7, still a top 10 team like we were speaking at kind of before. Virginia staying at 8, Marquette moving from 10 to 9, Alabama moving up from 12 to 10, North Carolina moving up to 11, Gonzaga moving up slightly to 12 just because teams are falling out. Obviously, they have their big game against Purdue still to come. Creighton 4-0, 13. UCLA at 14. Purdue still, like we mentioned, they still yet to play Gonzaga, moving up from 18 to 15. Texas A&M moving up to 16, moving up 6 spots. Miami doing the same, moving up to 17. Tennessee moving up to 18. Iowa State moving up 7, our biggest riser that we have so far, through into the top 20, moving from 26 to 19. Providence staying at 20, even though they have some good wins and one kind of tough loss to Kansas State, but still a team that we really like. Illinois, our biggest faller. So far we'll get to another one with USC right after, but moving from 11 to 21 at 3-1 after their loss to Marquette. I just think that team's got too much talent to be losing games like that, and they'll likely rise back up into probably the top 15 or 16 at some point during the year. USC moving from 9 to 22, our biggest faller overall. Arkansas moving down to 23 from 16 after a loss to UNC Greensboro. That's just unacceptable. Texas 25 to 24. Kansas State, technically our biggest riser. They're moving up from being not ranked to now being 25 after their win against Providence. BYU moving up to 26. Villanova moving down slightly after the loss to Penn to 27, but still had a good win to kind of follow that up. And then we have Oregon moving up from 30 to 28. Mississippi State moving up from being unranked to 29. James Madison moving up from 32 to 30. And then we have FAU moving from 21 to 31 after their loss to Bryant. Again, just another shake your head at them loss. And then Michigan State moving down from 29 to 32 after the loss against Duke. Kind of the first 4 in. Looking forward, we got Utah kind of at 33, what we'd call Indiana at 34 after the loss to UConn now, even though that we still had them unranked, but that's going to knock them a little bit, but not as much as you'd think. Texas Ohio State falling out from 28 to 35, and then we have St. Mary's falling out from 31 to 36. Still really early on, but we're kind of getting a feel for how the landscape's working out in the top 32, and there's still a lot of teams that have an opportunity to prove themselves throughout the year.
Yeah, man. I mean, we saw a lot of upsets this past week, more than I thought I would see. I mean, the big ones,
thinking about
obviously.
it, there's not as many unbeaten teams as there were last year in the top.
There's 60. I just saw a tweet about it. There are 68 unbeaten teams left.
Wow.
That's it. And some of them are playing each other.
I think we made it to, I think it was week 6. I think it was at some point when I was doing it by myself where we had like 4 unbeaten teams or 5 unbeaten teams left in the country. And it was like New Mexico State, UConn, Purdue, and I can't remember. But there was very, very few unbeaten teams at some point in the year, and I think we're going to get to that point much earlier than we did last year.
Yeah, a lot of teams
are that first week of conference play. It's going to be a bloodbath,
especially in a few specific conferences.
Well, we'll talk. I mean, do we just want to lead with the Big Ten struggles?
Oh, they've been. Yeah, I think we should because it's something to mention. I mean, how many marquee wins can we look at the Big Ten and point to them having right now at this point?
Not many.
Do they have any?
I mean, not really. I don't think that the Big Ten really has any marquee wins. Ohio State losing to Texas A&M, Indiana losing to UConn. Obviously Michigan State losing to James Madison and Duke. Illinois losing to Marquette, Wisconsin losing to Tennessee.
And Providence
the Big Ten doesn't have a team besides Purdue that's unbeaten. And they don't have a team that's in the top. They only have one team in the top 20, and they have 3 teams in the top 32. And we're basically giving Michigan State a nod because we think that they're going to win the battle of attrition, I think. But yeah, rough start for the Big Ten.
I mean, we did talk about it. How look, they're a conference that always beats each other up and struggles going into the tournament. But I don't think that either of us could have predicted that the way that their conferences has been wired, that they would struggle this much. I just think that they're geared to beat each other much more than they're geared to beat anybody else. And that's a problem. I mean, you also have the issue of a lot of guys left, right? A lot of the big names are out of there. Hunter Dickinson's gone, right? Trey Jackson Davis gone. Michigan lost a lot. Indiana lost a lot, and those were 2 of the prominent teams. Illinois,
Murray's out of
right.
Chris Murray's out of Iowa. There's
Iowa lost Chris Murray. I mean, I'm sure
Wisconsin's we talked about Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Maryland are really the only teams that brought back their core.
But Maryland's look terrible.
Yeah, they look like they're going to struggle, but I think once they get Jamie Kaiser more involved, he's been playing a little bit more the last couple games. I think that once he gets going, I don't think Villanova is a good game. Just have him have his first start of his NCAA career, in my opinion. But he'll bounce back at some point. He's a player I like, and I think he'll be a big player as a sophomore, maybe. But yeah, rough stuff.
I mean, is there a single Big Ten team that we can really look at and say, because we said going into the season that they weren't going to be an impactful tournament?
Well, I mean, we don't
like
like Purdue just based off of the fact that it's a one-player-driven team. But I mean, they're really the only team that I see as a threat in the entire country right now.
Maybe Michigan State needs to be able to shoot the ball a lot better.
Yeah, but I mean, their guards are just chuckers, and I'm not a big fan of chuckers. I think that they need to play a more Michigan State-oriented brand of basketball, get the ball inside more often. To Sissoko, he's too good of a player to not get as many touches as he does.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is
they were at their best at the beginning of the year last year when they were running plays for him and letting their guards be playmakers rather than geared to score every possession. I think that they've gotten obsessed and sensationalized this idea of this 3-guard lineup that's going to torch you from the mid-range and from 3. It's just not a conducive form of basketball where we're looking across the country and teams, even that have a ton of talent on the perimeter, are still getting the ball inside consistently. Look at Kansas. They have stars on the perimeter. Kevin McCullough Jr. is a star in college basketball. DeJuan Harris is a star in college basketball. They have Marco Jackson, who's come in and put good minutes. He's a star in college basketball. Yet every time they get the ball down the court, KJ Adams or fucking Hunter Dickinson are touching the ball in the paint. You know what I mean? It's just irritating.
You could say the same thing about UNC.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They run through Armando. They have great guard play, and they run through Armando Bacot as often as they possibly can.
Arizona's the same way.
Yep. Oh, even when Balo didn't have a great night against Duke, they still were attempting to get the ball inside to him and using that to generate looks, right? Especially when Krivas came in the game, who is another guy we should get to we're probably going to feature in the next couple of weeks on our stock rising segment. They're looking to the rim, and that's a big part of college basketball. College basketball is much more inside out than outside in. And, I think there's a lot of teams that have seen the NBA shoot a lot of threes. Another thing, and this is, I think, a different issue, but it's still an issue. Some of the screening I've seen in college basketball this year has been atrocious.
Too many people spin screens like it's 2K.
Yeah, I put out a tweet about it where I was like, dude, like, why are we setting so many ghost screens that aren't designed ghost screens? Set the screen. I mean, a lot of the ways that you get a player open, especially your guards, it just makes the life easier for you.
Something that I have to teach my 3rd and 4th grade boys basketball team. It's not something I should go and watch college basketball and see a struggle.
No.
Let's get back to the 90s. College basketball was supposed to be the form of basketball that's supposed to reminisce us of the 90s, and it's just moved away from that this year.
Yeah, too much finesse. I mean, and we're seeing the more physical teams win games. I mean, look at Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Houston has had one game where they've given up more than 50 points because they play this hard-nosed, physical. We're going to send 3 guys to the offensive glass. Doesn't matter how many shots we miss, because eventually we're going to get the rebound and put it back in. And you're not going to score on us. They play that old brand of basketball. And they held Brandon Carlson to a tough night at the office. One of the only teams that's done that this year.
And they're going to play against Dayton, and I anticipate that, tonight, and I anticipate that they're going to force Deron Holmes to do things that he's not comfortable.
Yeah, they're not going to. They're going to make life difficult for Deron Holmes tonight, 100%. And it's
and
these
they're
finesse
still
teams
playing.
that
I
are
mean, they have LJ Cryer and Jamal Shed, and they're still playing through, Juwan Roberts and Javier Francis and getting those guys touches. And working inside out. It just opens up so much for your guards, and I think that that's something that I'd like to see more of a lot of these teams.
Yeah. Should we get into the mid-major stuff?
Yeah, we'll run through the mid-major stuff quick. Justin Abson for Appalachian State. Just a player that I love and want to shout out his game. Had 12 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 blocks versus Oregon State. A great player. I think that he's got a ton of upside. He's only a sophomore at 6'9", dropped some weight, good mobility. I don't think he deserves much more time other than a shout out, but good for him. He with the more volume that he's playing was one of the best shot blockers, efficiency, like block percentage wise last year, in the entire country as a freshman. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like throughout the year. And he's probably a guy that might transfer up and bolster a front court somewhere in the country next year. Eric Gaines for UAB, 63 minutes this week, 35 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 steals, and 2 blocks, including a great performance and upset over Maryland. With the amount of volume that he's getting, it's good to see that he's still efficient, 1 point per possession overall. Just a player that I like. And I know you dig Eric Gaines as well. Just somebody to continue to watch. I think a lot of people are forgetting about him and UAB, and they don't have the dynamic, duo of him and Jelly Walker anymore, but he's still a really notable player.
Yeah. He's got to shoot the 3 a little bit more efficiently, but outside of that, his efficiency.
He's got to play more efficiency, period. But I think getting to the basket, he's one of the most underrated guards in the country.
Yeah, great
Keyshawn Hall for George Mason. One of my guys. I know that I've been harping about him a lot. And I've said a lot to Julian about his game. 7 points versus Monmouth, 14 versus Austin P, 29 in a outburst performance versus Cornell, and averaging 10.3 rebounds to go with the scoring. Going to continue to have a breakout season. Transfer from UNLV, 6'7", dropped about 30 pounds. Looks great. Playing more guard than forward. This year, I think that once he gets into his playmaking bag, he's going to be a guy that I think for a George Mason team could be an underrated draft prospect. Just has a bag to score inside the paint and punish mismatches. And I think as the shot comes along and people will see it like, oh, this kid's a legit shooter, he's a legit scorer, his stock's only going to get better.
Yeah, he's played in the wide open CAA this year. I'm excited to see what he can do. Yeah,
Tyler Perkins for Penn had 22 points versus Villanova in an upset win for Pennsylvania. A high quality freshman. He had a really good start to the year. I hope that he can continue that consistency throughout the year. A little up and down here later in the week, but a great performance against Villanova. Dylan Jones for Weber State, averaging currently 24 and 12 on 52.8% field goal percentage. Just a guy to note. Really, really good player. Needs to work on his efficiency, but 6'6", crazy versatility. And is another one of those guys similar to Keyshawn Hall and Eric Gaines, where it's like if he continues to have a good year, this is an underrated draft prospect guy at a mid-major school. And there's always 1 or 2 of them that sneak in, either to get a 2-way contract or a late second draft pick, maybe even middle. I think that he offers that versatility. He needs to shoot the 3 ball better, but on defense, he's a monster at 6'6". To be able to average 10 rebounds a game is awesome and shows a lot about his work ethic. And just is a really fun player to watch, period.
Yeah, he's nasty at finishing through contact around the rim and creating space for the midi. Really, really
One of
impressive
the best
player.
below the rim finishers I've seen in college basketball so far this year.
Yeah, he's unfazed by contact. I love guys like that.
Stocks
Speaking
on the
of being
rise.
unfazed,
Stock on the
speaking of
rise.
being unfazed, let's talk about Rob Dillingham.
Rob Dill, baby.
Um,
RDD or RRD.
RRD, respect
Dillingham.
Rob Dillingham.
Human flamethrower, as you noted here, shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three, while averaging 16, 4, and 4 off the bench. Has more steals and turnover through 4 games coming off the bench. We said it with Raphael. We thought he was going to be the odd man out for this Kentucky team, and he's taken this bench role, and just looks like the Lou Williams of college basketball so far this year. I think he's by far and away the favorite to be SEC 6-man of the year right now. We've seen a player like Javon Quinterly win that last year, and it's exciting to see that there's a young player that's embracing a role like this. And it's something that we talked about with guys like John Lovelace, guys like David Dixon, guys like Ethan Roberts. Embracing these roles when you get put in the positions to succeed is going to lead to success down the line. And, I'm just pumped to see him continue to ball out because he's fun to watch. His playmaking so underrated. And like you said, I mean, he can just torch a game, like completely take over.
I mean, I was watching, there was a good 2-minute stretch in that KU Kentucky game where it felt like every time he got the ball, he was going to shoot and that it was going to go in. And that was what happened. I think he drained a good 3 or 4 heat checks in a row. And he has this unwavering confidence, which here's the thing that I like about him. Because he has this unwavering confidence. So we talked about, if the shot selection's bad with Raphael, he's probably going to get benched. The shot selection hasn't been bad. Like, he's not taking these crazy, sure, he's taken a few tough shots, but a lot of the shots that he's taken that, have gotten him into a rhythm are good rhythm jump shots that he is just confident that he's going to make. Sure, maybe there was an extra pass here or there that, potentially he could have hit every once in a while. But when he's feeling it and he decides, I can score, I'm going to score, he creates space so well. And he gets to a spot so well that he has been just a lightning rod. I mean, it really does feel like that a lot of the times when Kentucky gets back into games or what really gets them going is when they just kind of give him the keys. I'm honestly, given how Wagner's played so far, wondering if he plays his way in, if Dillingham plays his way into a starting role at some point, or if they decide, you know what, we're content with having him be the 6th man who gets 25 minutes a game off the bench, and that's that. But I think it's a conversation that Calipari might want to start to have, given the way that Dillingham started the season so far.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you made a great point about Shepard here in our notes. He's the perfect off-ball counterpart to Dillingham, and is just scorching, shooting the ball. We've seen a handful of these freshmen come in that were primarily shooters and are just thriving in these off-ball roles, similar to what we were talking about with Milan last week.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch because their ball movement has been so good. That when the ball gets moving and Dillingham is creating, Shepard is a really, really good guy to locate space, and he's one of these guys where the ball touches his hand and is out of his hand in less than a second. Mm-hmm. When he decides to shoot the ball, it is so tough to stop because his release is so quick, it's so pure. And we really saw him it
takes pressure off the guys that are also in that core that are just not shooting the ball as well, like Edwards and Wagner and Fierro. Where when they're playing the perimeter, they can just make the swing pass to a guy like Shepard and know that the shot's going to go in.
Yeah, I mean it's a really the way that they've been playing so far. I'm curious to see if their ball movement gets worse when they had a big man. I don't think
I think so. I think because Bradshaw and
Ivisic can shoot
and both spread the floor.
Yeah, so that'll make it even more fun. But man, we're talking about them like they're 5-0 after they just lost a game. And I think, oddly enough, I'm sure you're feeling this way too, that despite the fact that they lost to Kansas, the fact that their team played so well
I almost feel
given
better after them losing to Kansas than I think I would have if they lost, like if they won a game that just wasn't clean from Kansas. They played against a Kansas team performing at the peak of their powers.
yeah, and if Hunter Dickinson didn't transfer to Kansas, Kansas loses that game straight up.
Speaking of a transfer big man, the number 2 transfer big man in the country last year, one spot below Hunter Dickinson is Kalel Ware. Currently is averaging 18 points per game, 10 rebounds, 2.3 assists, and 3 steals and blocks per game. Shooting 80% from inside the arc. He's looking like a stud.
Yeah, this Indiana team is fun, man. The front court is it's cool when like you have an expectation of what you can see what they're trying to do when they bring a guy in. And it's cool to see that fulfilled. And it looks like with Kalel Ware and Malik Reneau, they're getting exactly what they wanted. Reneau has been just an awesome interior paint presence. He's like putting up like weirdly Trace Jackson Davis numbers. Like I think I forget what the points are, but I know he's got 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, which is like a very TJD stat line. Yeah. And Kalel is like they're running this high low because Kalel can stretch the floor. And it's like this is what we wanted Kalel Ware to be at Oregon, right? We wanted him to pair with N'Faly Dante, and we wanted him to be this floor spacing big that could kind of be a secondary rim protector. Although with Reneau, he's kind of
the paint. I mean, they threw both Ware and Dante in the paint together, and that just didn't work out.
Exactly. And I think Indiana and Mike Woodson have figured out like, hey, like this guy can move. Why don't we have him do the whole like run around the perimeter thing and let Reneau operate by himself in the post? And defensively, that's where we'll have Kalel Ware anchors. And it's been a really good formula for them. And I think it's really exciting to see a guy like Kalel Ware who, look, he's had his issues, right? But I think to see the defense look really good, and especially to see that he's being hyper efficient with the ball in his hands, especially inside the arc, he's shooting 30% from 3. So it's not like he's been atrocious from 33% from 3. I'm sorry. So it's not like he's been atrocious from beyond the arc. This is what you want Kalel Ware to be doing, right? I think he's finally starting to play himself into a role where you look at him and you go, you know what? Like, I think this guy might be a first round pick this year. And I don't think that we were even close to saying that last
year. Yeah, I think we were definitely a lot higher on him earlier in the process, but neither me or you really liked the fit with Oregon.
No, and it's good to see him in an opportunity where he's really going to fit. And I'm excited I'm weirdly excited about Indiana this season. I know they just got like the doors kicked off
for Reneau off post ups. He's 1.242 points per possession, including passes, 90th percentile. And yeah, I mean that's really good numbers on 33 possessions.
He's been phenomenal, and I did watch them get blown out, but what those two guys do encourages me for the Big Ten, at least for those for Indiana. You know, like they're going to be a really good team this year. I mean, UConn's the best team in college basketball, according to us, which I don't think is that controversial.
Tristan Newton had 23, 11, and 6 today against Indiana. So, and Reneau had 18 points and 3 blocks.
Exactly. I mean, if those guys can do that.
Newton.
Shout out Tristan Newton. Shout out Caravan had a good game as well today. Caravan looked really good.
Nigel Pax currently got 28 points in the last with 5 minutes left to play against Kansas State.
Are they still getting crushed?
Yeah, Kansas State's losing by 15.
Oh, they were down 19 at the half, so I guess that's not terrible. Not terrible.
Speaking of helping teams win when they need it, Caleb Foster's been great. 7 for 8 from the field, 4 for 5 from 3, and for 18 points. Versus Michigan State, provided a nice spark off the bench in the second half to give them the win over Michigan State. And I said on Twitter that this is the perfect complementary piece to put alongside Mark Mitchell and Kyle Filipowski, and shout out Ersin Demir. He said it at the beginning of the year that he thinks if there's a player on Duke's roster I like Jared McCain because I thought Jared McCain would fill this type of role, but he's been, tasked with more secondary playmaking. And really just they're using him as a defensive weapon in the perimeter. Where Caleb Foster is able to just kind of sit in the corner and sit on the wing and just, catch nice, easy passes and hit open shots, which is what Duke needs.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like every time Michigan State started to find a way back into that game, someone would hit a big shot, and that someone was Caleb Foster. And like it was very, kind of like the Rob Dillingham thing where like the guy came off the bench and hooped, and Duke needs that because I mean they have a lot of talent on their bench between Foster, TJ Power, and Sean Stewart. But those other two guys have not really got going, So I think at this point, like Foster's the first guy off the bench, and Foster is going to be he's the key, he's their X factor at this point. Like we know what their top end can do. We've seen it before. It's about what these young guys can bring to this top three. And I think for Duke, that's the biggest thing that they need. They had 5 bench points in that loss against Arizona. And Foster had 18 by himself against Michigan State. I mean, that's triple the bench points from one guy. I mean, going forward, that's going to be big for Duke.
Speaking of role players and high value ones at that.
Oh,
Ryan Dunn.
Oh my God.
Is me with my high value role players. Ryan Dunn's that. 10.8 points per game, 7.8 rebounds, 3.3 steals, and 2.3 blocks per game to start the year. Just one of the smartest players in college basketball. And for him to be playing like he is after people are kind of calling for him to be the guy that took a huge step for Virginia, it's just so impressive.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. When I was digging
I was hyping him up a lot preseason. I think I had him top 25 on my board, and now he's looking like a guy who probably could be a top 10 pick, in my opinion.
He should be a top 10 pick. I haven't seen a player.
I had him at 34.
I haven't seen a player in this class so far who plays. I mean, you talked about the basketball IQ. I know it's an overused term, but I mean, this kid, you can see it as possessions develop. You can see him relocating. You can see him going to set the screen. You can even see him calling out where the ball's supposed to go. And the hustle. I mean, you see him fighting on the boards. You see him fighting for loose balls. He's a great cutter. I mean, he does the big things really, really well. He reads passing lanes. He's a really good defender. But for me, what like really stuck out,
best defender in college basketball.
I agree. But what stuck out to me when I watched the film, like, wasn't the raw talent stuff. It's like this guy sets hard screens. Yes, he sets screens, guys, like actual screens. His awareness of when to cut, his like relocation time, like all the little things that you need players to do within an offense, he does really, really well. And his jumper is pure. We didn't even talk about his jump shot, which is, I mean, just very, very clean, very smooth. He's really athletic. I think this kid's going to be a top 10 pick when the season's all said and done.
I agree. I think if Virginia's makes it to the second weekend of the tournament, he is going to be a top 10 pick.
I agree. He has to be at this point. There's not much else he can do.
I'd take him and Tyler Smith over any wings probably in the country. I mean, if I'm drafting, I'm taking both of them over Justin Edwards, and I'm sorry, but it's like if I'm a team and I have the 4th overall pick in the NBA draft, and I know that there's a team that has 8 and 11, I'm trading down, and if I can take Justin Edwards at 4 or one of these other wings at 4, or I can trade down and get Ryan Dunn and Tyler Smith, I'm doing that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I hate to say it because I'm Justin Edwards guy, but I think so too.
I think that's where the value is. I mean, he's somebody that if you get on if he gets drafted like in a range where Cam Whitmore got drafted, it's undoubtedly like he's going to come in and be the steal of the draft. He's like Christian Braun, you know what I mean? Like he's going to come in and impact winning day one. That's all I have to say about that. Brandon Carlson, speaking of impact and winning, 59 minutes this week, 48 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 assists, had 31 points, and including 5 blocks against their win against Wake Forest. an early season ACC battle, or no, it's not even an ACC battle. Because
ACC Pac-12 battle.
but yeah, ACC Pac-12 battle. Just really impressive. He's somebody that you just have to go watch. I'm not going to say anything more about it. He's somebody that you just have to go watch. A modern big man, modern jump shot from a 7-footer. I think he's gotten even a little bit taller this year. I think he's more towards 7'1". And when he has it going offensively, he is one of the toughest players to stop in the entire country.
He
'Cause
makes
does it
that
on all
Utah
three
team good.
levels.
He creates so much for that Utah team because of what he can do with spacing the floor.
In the pick and roll, in the post up, just does everything. I mean, he took those Wake Forest bigs completely out of that game. He made them
Yeah.
look like scrubs.
Yep. And it's interesting because Utah has had a pretty tumultuous schedule. You know,
God, they
like
played tough teams.
they have not had an easy ride so far at all.
No, I think if anything, they've had one of the tougher schedules. They play they play tomorrow, I believe, or they play tonight, and they played on the 17th and the 16th, or the 7th. I think they might have played 3 games in like the last 5 days.
Yeah. And tough games too. I mean, Wake Forest and Houston on a back-to-back is not an easy back. And they're the, like we said earlier in the pod, they're the only team that dropped more than 50 points against Houston.
Mm-hmm. And he almost dropped 50 points himself in those 2 games.
I know. Yeah.
Tyler Kolek for Marquette. Shout out Tyler Kolek, our banner feature for this year. Last year was Grady Dick. This year it's Tyler Kolek. 22 points on 10 for 18 versus Illinois, but box score stats don't even tell the whole story.
No, he's so
the leader of the Marquette team. That looks like easily a team that should be in the consideration for national title favorites, I think, at this point this year. Cam Jones obviously is incredible. Also, Iguodala is one of the most underrated role players in the country. But I don't know. He's phenomenal. I think he's just like exactly what you want in a point guard at the college level. Good size, high IQ, knows how to orchestrate the offense and get his own shot. It's just like really, really rare when you find a combination of those 3 things. And when you normally do, it's going to lead to a lot of winning.
So this isn't the most like stunning revelation in the world to like boost his stock immensely, but he has like the most effective spin in college basketball.
Yeah.
Like he uses it all the time and it is like ridiculous. It felt like when I was in and out kind of watching that Marquette game, but every time I felt like, because I was more focused on the Michigan State Duke game and then the Kansas Kentucky game. So I was kind of, jumping back and forth to that game. But it felt like every time I turned the game on, Tyler Kolek was making either a bucket, getting an assist, hitting a jump. Like he was doing something pretty much routinely every like random interval that I'd turn on the game. And that's just what he does. He always has an impact on the game in some capacity. I honestly think him and Cam Jones are the best backcourt in the country.
Mm-hmm. We talked about last night or 2 nights ago. They definitely are. Speaking of a dominant pairing, this time in the front court, at least going forward, I think they should be considered as something that could be dominant. Adem Bona and Daimar Gomez are 2 of the most interesting. Is just the most interesting front court pairing in the country, in my opinion. They're starting to use them at the same time. Obviously Bonus had a great year and probably one of the most underrated center prospects in this draft class because he is a prospect in this draft class. He is going to get drafted this year, undoubtedly.
100%.
18 points per game on 57% from the field, even taking some mid-range jumpers, 2.3 blocks and 1.3 steals per game. Just a dominant player on the defensive end of the floor and on the glass. And like I said early on in the season, it's just really, really interesting to watch Bona play make now out of the high post. And, now that, like Mara is getting like solid minutes. I just think it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's good that they struggled in that Lafayette game because it gave them an opportunity to see what works, and they played a lot of those 2 guys in that game as an experiment. And I think that Mick Cronin liked what he saw enough that it's something he wants to continue in the future. I don't know why Mara didn't get minutes early on. He's significantly better than Uba. But it's good to see the two of them together. I think the cool thing about that pairing is now that Bona is able to make that high-low pass, is you can really like decide which matchup you want to use more, whether it's Matt Mara, if you like Matt Mara's matchup or Bona's matchup better in the high post, you can like alternate which one of those two guys you want being the high man in the high low game. That's a really exciting prospect for them. And Mara is, I mean, in the game, and the more minutes Mara's played, the more comfortable he's getting. You can clearly see early on he was a little bit unsure of what, he wasn't used to the style of college basketball those first 5-10 minutes he played on NCAA court. But you can tell he's getting. They have a really big test against Marquette, and I'm really excited to see what Mara and another guy that has not gotten minutes in V-Day look like in that game. But I think UCLA is starting to come together. It's starting to work. There were a few games where it was kind of like Chris Mack is like, dude, I have 10 guys who could probably play on this team. What do I do? He still hasn't played. I mean, Burke still hasn't been ruled eligible yet. We don't know when Burke Big Tunsil is going to play. But Phoebe Wheels looked really good. It was good. So V-Day, just to kind of segue in it, V-Day got 11 minutes over those first two games, and showed flashes. And he finally gets his opportunity to get 24. He gets 21 minutes, and he drops 12.7 assists. That's a great sign. I think he's going to make it clear in the next couple of games. I think he's going to be the starting point guard for that team.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he has real upside at the one. And I couldn't have said any of that better myself. I think, for the sake of time, should continue to kind of go into the previews. Starting at the top with kind of, the major game. On the 23rd, we got number 2 Arizona versus number 32 Michigan State. I have Arizona in that game and kind of 3-guard versus 3-guard matchup with Jaden Bradley, Caleb Love, and Colin Boswell versus Tyson Walker, AJ Hogard, and Jaden Akins. And then we also have the front court pairings with Krivas and Balo versus Hall and Sissoko, and Paulius versus Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's 6-guard Monty, but Arizona's guards are more effective. And when you look at the forwards, I mean, I think Cohen Carr has played a little bit better than Paulius just because he's played more. But Balo and Krivas are better than Sissoko and Hall. Arizona is just a more talented team, I think. And Michigan State is, like we said before, struggling to shoot. And I think they're going to get crushed on the inside. I wouldn't be surprised if both Balo and Krivas have double-doubles on the 23rd. That would not shock.
What'd you say? Sorry, I zoned out for a sec. I was just kind of looking up research for the games.
I was going to say I wouldn't be shocked if Balo and Krivas both put up double-doubles in this 100%. Game.
I'll be interested to see how Hall and Sissoko match up. I feel like Hall is going to have a lot of mismatches, and I'd be curious to see how he holds up as a 5th-year player against some of these younger guys in the front court for Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Arizona's just more efficient, more talented, and matches the depth of Michigan State, which not a lot of teams can say that they'll do. Other than Caleb Foster, Duke couldn't do it. JMU didn't have the depth, but their top end beat Michigan State's top end. That's kind of the whole draw to Michigan State is how much depth they have. But Arizona matches that and is better at the top. So I think it's going to be a kind of a massacre, to be honest with you. I think Arizona's going to dominate this game.
Yeah, I think that they're going to dog Michigan State, but I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State kind of uses this game to kind of make a statement that they're on the turnaround.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Want to move on? Ohio State, Bama.
Yep, go ahead. You can kind of give your summary of the game to start, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of a weak slate with our top 32 this week, which kind of blows because a lot of the tournaments are going on. There's a lot of to be decided games. So there's not really the best idea of some of the matchups. But I think this one's interesting because I think it's Alabama's first real test. Um, Grant Nelson's looked great against not great competition, which we expected. But what does he look like against, Casey Okpara, Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, and Scotty Milton, and Zed Key? I I don't know, man. I think Bama's better and they should win this game. Um, I'm still on the train of like I don't trust the Big Ten, and that could be part of the reason that I'm picking them over Ohio State here. But I'm not sure about this Bama team yet. I still need to see something other than them beating a lot of bad teams. So this is kind of like their measuring stick game for me. I'm curious to hear what you think about it because I know you have Ohio State.
I kind of similar to what I just said again about Michigan State. I think that this could be a matchup where we look at Roddy Gale and things he's been able to do so far this year, and some of the role players that they have around him. I think this is a decent Ohio State team, and I think this is a really good Alabama team. But I could see, on an off night for maybe Grant Nelson or Jarn Stevenson, where kind of the maturity of this Ohio State team and the continuity kind of takes hold and could lead to an upset victory. And I thought maybe, I didn't think Michigan State maybe will beat Arizona, but I think it could be a bounce back game for Ohio State.
Yeah, I can see that just because, like I said, like Bama's unproven, you know? We don't really know what they are. Speaking of unproven, Oregon's also relatively unproven.
Yeah.
Our
We have
number
Santa
28.
Clara versus number 28 Oregon. I kind of summarized the game as Adama Ball versus Oregon, but this Santa Clara team's really good. They're undefeated. And I think that they're a team to watch, obviously, with all the prospects that they've been able to produce over the last couple of years with Podzimski and Jalen Williams. And I think Adama Ball is next in that line of being a guy who could be a first round pick out of Santa Clara. I buy Adama Ball. I think that he's the type of player that could have a takeover game if he needs to. And I just want to see it. So I pick Santa Clara versus Oregon over Oregon.
Yeah, I actually don't have anything to add to that. I have Santa Clara for pretty much the exact same reason.
I think it's more of a want thing than a no thing. And so far we're both 2-1. Obviously we have these two games left with Purdue and Purdue Gonzaga and UCLA versus Marquette games. So those are kind of, the jury's still out kind of on our records. But in these upset games that we kind of picked or we had I have Purdue beating Gonzaga and UCLA beating Marquette. I think that out of all the upset games that upset picks that we've had, this would by far be the most entertaining one if it happened. And speaking of upsets, I have Wisconsin shocking the world versus number 8 Virginia. And kind of the summary for this game for me, I mean, you guys know I'm a big Andrew Rohde fan. He may not be a fan of me or acknowledge me, but he knows I'm talking about him, and my content about him was probably a minor reason. And the analysis that I did aligned with why I ended up at Virginia. And if you didn't know, he's from Brookfield. So he's from Wisconsin, and he's taking on Wisconsin, a team that probably should have recruited him out of high school. And he chose to go to St. Thomas and ended up obviously at Virginia. And I look for Wisconsin to kind of justify, staying with their core, and I have them knocking off the number 8 team in the country by our measures. And I think it'd be an interesting game. We're going to see Ryan Dunn take on AJ Storr. And the more I talk about this game, the less I like the pick, but I got to be a homer on this one.
It'd be great if Andrew Rohde comes in and
drops
puts like a
40.
30 ball or a 40 ball on your Wisconsin Badgers. That would be like the epitome of irony right there. I would love that. I took UVA. I'm not a homer to Wisconsin and do not feel obligated to pick a 2-2
If
team.
Andrew Rohde would have liked one of my tweets last year, this would be a very different pick.
I'm not going to pick a 2-2 team that lost to Providence and Tennessee.
Neither am I. I'm taking Virginia.
You're switching. Oh, I got him. I finally got him.
I think Ryan Dunn could lock up AJ Storr, and I don't like Wisconsin so far this year that much. I think that there'll be a team that wins a lot in Big Ten conference play, but they have a lot of things that they need to sort out. They need to shoot more threes and less fadeaway mid-range jump shots.
You know what?
That's end of conversation for me.
I'll take this as a win because means that I convinced you to back out of a homer pick, and that's a win for me. I'm 1-0. I almost got you on the Kentucky Kansas pick. I almost did, but my last name's not quite as homery or entertaining, but it is a fun one. Bradley Tulane, Sion James, Malevi Leons.
Just for the prospect's sake, I think that this will be an interesting game to watch because I think Malevi Leons will guard Sion James. Hopefully.
I think he will. He guarded Tucker DeVries. He guards the best player. I think that's what they do.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Sion James is going to be the best player on this given day for Tulane. But I think on some given days that he can put up numbers and be a dominant threat driving to the basket and knock down some threes here and there. So I think it'll just be an interesting game to watch. Obviously that game is tomorrow, so we'll get pretty early returns on that. And it will likely be, it'll likely be up before we, in the article that'll accompany this podcast that's released on Wednesdays at 6 Month Madness on Twitter and at on the clock on the _ clock BB on Twitter. Go check those out and make sure to show us some love in the comments and the like button. I just think it's a good game. I think it'll be interesting to watch and gotta show some mid-major love sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, measuring stick game for Bradley.
Can they continue the hot start that they've had this year?
Yeah, they passed their first, relative test against Utah State. Not with flying colors. It did take them overtime to get it done, but Bradley's a good team, man. I really think if they make it to March, that if it's a one-man team, then Malevi can knock them. I really do. I believe that. He's that good defensively. And I think we both have, Bradley winning this game because we do believe that they're the better team. But it is a measure. There's a couple of these games this week could be blowouts, but they're measuring stick games. You want to see teams that have looked really, really good in games against LIU and St. Francis and Chaminade, who Kansas is playing on Tuesday. Shout out Chaminade. And Troy. That's more of a football one. But you want to see these teams who have played, lesser competition. I don't want to dog, low majors and mid majors too much because they make noise in the tournament sometimes. But you want to see them play against teams that are probably on par with where they're at right now. And that's what a few of these games are this week, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it should be a fun week in college basketball. And with that being said, we're off the clock.